So the 8th event goes in the books, and it is Australia that gets their first win of the season. The overall leaders, but they get their first win as Tom Slingsby and the Australians get the win on home waters. Todd Harris, Emily Nagel, Stevie Morrison. Wow, final thoughts on that one. Take a deep breath.
Ooh, well, it was pretty heated in that final. I had my money on Denmark going into it. I was looking good for a little bit. I was quite pleased with how they were doing. And then it all changed so quickly.
I had my money on New Zealand, so I just missed out. Stevie, now you're going to tell us you had your money on Australia the whole time.
I think if you listen to the previous podcast, you will hear that's what I said, which wasn't maybe the bravest of decisions. But yeah, a big moment for the Australians. We're so used to them winning, but they haven't actually won for a long time, despite sitting so far clear at the top. And I think what's just great is how good is SailGP and this F50 racing when they're up and foiling and in good conditions. You know, if we get Mother Nature turn up, it's some show.
If Australia wins this and Australia goes on to take this title and they get the whole thing, is this a big deal, no deal, or is this a turning point for them?
I think you could hear in Tom's voice a lot today that it's quite a big deal. He's not one to go easy on himself. He's won so much and they're so used to winning, but he doesn't seem to sort of I think he maybe puts all the medals out the back and forgets about them, and it's always about the next race, the next race, the next race. And when he hasn't won for a while, I think he does get a bit down on himself, and it's ominous for the rest of the fleet that they've let him win. Caveat that by the fact that Nathan, did a fantastic job for New Zealand, but I think he'll be kicking himself on that start. He kind of had it there. The door was open to go through, and he just went a fraction early when he didn't need to. It was an unforced mistake, and he opened the door for the Aussies, and Burling wasn't here. Burling's going to come back. Would Pete have pulled the trigger that second early? Maybe. Who knows? But,
We all thought that the start was the key and that the Great Dane was going to go on, maybe take the victory, and then you were going to look like a genius. But that was not it. It was gate number 3, Emily. That really was the move of the race.
Yeah, and we saw it at Mark 1 just how close they were. Like, yes, the start was important, but when we only had 3 boats on the course, and they were only meters apart on that first downwind leg, it really meant that any shift they got on that first upwind was going to make a huge difference. And we did see the Danish go to the side of the course that previously hadn't really been that strong.
I think I'd like to watch it back, Todd, because there was a moment up there where Australia and New Zealand were locked neck and neck, side by side. It's now more of a boat speed race. There's less boats on the course. The flight controllers are flying the boat higher, and I think you'll see that Denmark just got a little high, and they just managed to do a slight porpoise down. They caught the bow. It was maybe a couple of meters, but I reckon Slingsby got in there by half a meter or so. It came down to fine margins, maybe because they were pushing harder, maybe they were nervous. Nikolai's saying it's all about San Francisco, but he's never won one of these things yet. I wouldn't want the first one I had to win to be in San Francisco, because how am I going to be feeling on that last upwind having never done it before?
So with 8 events down of 13, this is the first time we've heard anyone mention the SF word, the San Francisco word, and that was Nikolai Sandstedt. So now that we're at the business end of season 4, how pivotal will the next event be in Christchurch?
I believe this event's been pretty pivotal. Those top 3 boats have got to jump. They look to class apart, I'd say. Yep. They look like the 3 best teams. Bit more wind, they're up and foiling. I think those conditions lend themselves to a pecking order. There's a bit less chance when they're up and foiling. They can keep out of the way. I think this has been pretty pivotal. I think for France, Spain, you'd argue that USA and Great Britain, but they look like they've got a lot of work to do with those big changes in the lineup. But they looked, now that we're in those conditions, some way behind the top boats. So maybe France and Spain can argue we've got a chance here still, but they've got to go to New Zealand and win.
Did you see anything at this regatta that made you think, okay, this team has got a chance, or they show me something other than Denmark, because they look fantastic?
I think some of the same thing we saw from the Spanish team was really promising. They were at the front of the fleet for some races. They made some silly errors that cost them a lot. But we are seeing them excel in more conditions other than the light wind conditions that we saw previously with them. But I think what was more telling was just how damaging this event was to some of our bigger name teams, the Brits, the Americans. Okay, yes, the Americans are a new team,
Well, that's not how they're approaching the league, is it?
Exactly.
They're coming in saying, we're here, we're judges
here to
as
win.
we are. Yeah, we're here to win. And that's great
they're
attitude.
chasing down.
Yeah.
Speaking of new teams, though, what did you think about Germany towards the end?
Right.
Day number 2.
Great shout. Well, and the end of yesterday, they had two
their
good
starts.
Yeah. They made an unforced error in that race 5. They came in late with that different play on things, but they went and got a boundary penalty. It was unforced error again. Easy to say unforced error, pushing too hard. But I think that was a slightly silly mistake that Eric will regret. But yeah, I think the Germans will come away from this event pretty happy.
It didn't have a lot of consequences, but they do get their first win in their first season.
Exactly, and every point counts. That you look at where they came overall for this event, it helps on the overall leaderboard. And at the end of the day, they're not really looking to win this season. They're looking further long term. And, this puts them in a really great position going into next season. Like, it's a long way off, but it's a lot more promising than when you look at the Swiss team, who are now at the bottom of the leaderboard.
All right, so event 8 is complete. We now look to event number 9. It will be in Christchurch. So much rich sailing history. We've talked about it before. Pete Burling will be back. He will be hungry for a big victory. Stevie, what can we expect?
What can we expect? Well, we saw fantastic sailing conditions when we were there last time. Brilliant stadium course. Great for the fans on the shore. Great for the fans here watching as we get to do. And it was good wind, good conditions. Seem to remember a few dolphins around. So let's hope they're kind of a little further out to sea and give us the sea to play in for the few hours that we need it. But yeah, one of the great iconic venues of last season. So can't wait to be back there and look for some close racing.
With those conditions, who do you like in New Zealand? I know I'm putting you out on a limb early with plenty of weeks to spare, but
I mean, you've got to say that the Kiwis are going to come out of the blocks firing. Pete's going to be back on board. He's going to have something to prove. Home waters as well. They're definitely going to have a home advantage.
And for those of you at home that are counting, then it'll be off to Bermuda, Emily's neck of the woods. Then you've got New York, you've got Halifax, and then the big showdown in San Francisco. And we put a big wrap on this thing. Stevie, I think we saw a lot of it. And to your point, I think a lot of teams emerged. Some teams kind of shrank from the spotlight. But, they say the cream always rises to the crop.
Yeah, absolutely. The cream does rise to the top, and the Australians are that so far. That is where they sit in SailGP, and rightly so with their results. But we're seeing a pecking order come out. We're seeing that it's not going to be easy for Tom Slingsby this year, but he's going to be feeling an awful lot lighter on his toes, and I'd imagine there's some party about to happen in Sydney right now.
Australia looking to make it 4 in a row. Can they get it done? The next step will come next month, March 23rd and 24th. That will be at the ITM New Zealand Sail Grand Prix. So for Emily Nagel and Stevie Morrison, I'm Todd Harris. We hope you enjoyed the coverage from Sydney, Australia. Next stop, New Zealand.